So what I'm hearing you say, Jack, is so many people who end up on boards of directors, good leaders, good business people, don't necessarily transition themselves into the role they're expected to be in. They bring their old role to the table.
I think so, and I think some of them are carried away with the so-called honor of being on a board of directors. They need to get over it.
So really what we're measuring, which is the same for any leaders, we're measuring how this individual is progressing, how this company is progressing towards its objectives and towards its goals. So as we look at the importance of a company having goals and objectives, that brings up the question of your observations of successful companies who have or have not had aggressive strategic planning focuses, and your opinion of where strategic planning fits in the success or failure of a company.
Okay, let me give you an example. When I went with Northern Petrochemical, we built from scratch the largest grassroots chemical complex ever built. In today's dollars, it would be about $4 billion. I was the chief planning officer on that. I had a huge planning staff. I had qualified people in every place. We had all the details covered. We also had lots of money. We had a major oil company backing us. Frankly, we could make some minor mistakes after we were operational, and we could still survive. As a matter of fact, eventually that business was acquired by Enron. The planning was good enough that the complex is still operating under another name. Strategic planning is more important in small businesses, where a mistake will kill you, where you don't have unlimited access to funds. And most people think, well, I'm a little entrepreneur, I can't afford planning. My thing would be, you're a little entrepreneur, you're probably undercapitalized, you cannot afford not to plan.
It's interesting that you make that observation. So in a large organization that has a depth of assets, their ability to survive a mistake or two due to poor or lack of planning is different than most businesses, most business owners who have limited capital. Maybe since we are all very careful with our capital, we make sure our capital is invested appropriately. And so our margin of error becomes significantly less.
You bet. In some cases, your margin of error is none.
So how do these companies, most companies that we're describing, how do they approach strategic planning, and how do they make sure that they are implementing the strategic plan that they have identified?
How do most of them do? They ignore it. That's why most of them go out of business. We all know the statistics of startup companies. They're terrible.
Sure.
Because they think they can't afford it. The real thing is, you have to be willing to start within your means. You have to be willing to focus on profit and cash flow, no matter what your plans for the growth of your business. Most businesses are like a 10-round fight. You can win the first 3 rounds, but if you aren't standing in the last round, you don't win. And I think most businesses probably don't plan with cash flow in mind. They also have a tendency to think that their competitors are their enemies. That's not true. They may be your rivals, but they're not your enemies. They also have a tendency to look...
And in some cases, I don't mean to interrupt you, but in some cases, your competitors may actually end up acquiring you, or you, if your strategic plan is strong, may acquire them.
Yeah, and that's the way we operate. That's
So it becomes more of an acquisition strategy than a rivalry.
Yeah, it is, and I remember when I was with Monsanto. They sent me to Michigan. I was the youngest area supervisor they had. They sent me to Michigan because it wasn't very good agriculturally. It was a throwaway state in their mind. At the end of the first year, we had a meeting at the end of June where they brought in all the people from the Corn Belt in St. Louis. Each person was to tell their results. This was my first time in front of a board of directors. People went into great detail. I just went in and said, we are 120% of our volume budget. We are 203% of our profits budgets. And we got another month to run. Everybody else is finished. And I sat down in 2 minutes. Everybody else took half an hour, 45 minutes, and rambled on. All my peers thought that I had killed myself till the chairman of the board said, when you do a good job, it doesn't take very long to tell about it. Okay? And I think that's true. I think that if you want to stay in business, you better have positive cash flow, and you better plan on how you're doing it. And you may have to change your strategic plans a little bit and pull them back so that you stay in business.